everyone, and welcome back to DadMode, God, Grit, and Goals. I am your host, Mike Tobias, and today we're going to be diving into a topic that's both timely and a bit challenging. So to let you know, over the past week, the news of 3 major Christian leaders stepping down has sent some shockwaves through their communities, and these are ones that I'm pretty familiar with, at least from the outside looking in. This isn't just news. It's really a profound moment of reflection for many of us. And I got to thinking, why did these fails hit so hard? Why is there such a deep sense of betrayal? It seems like a good time to ask a hard question. Are we as believers focusing too much on the leaders of our churches rather than on Christ himself? I wonder about that. This issue isn't just about the individuals involved. It's about how we structure our faith communities and where we place our trust. I've really been wondering a lot about the American church. Is it entertainment? Is it an infomercial? Or is it a training ground? So today I would like to try and inspire you a bit by some insights from 2 amazing thinkers. I was listening to a podcast today, over the last week, and I'm sure you're familiar with the names. Jordan Peterson, a psychologist known for his exploration of how beliefs shape our lives. He's the author of the book 12 Rules for Life. And he was interviewing another guy I wasn't familiar with named McGilchrist. He's a psychiatrist who has studied how different parts of our brain influence our perception and decision making. So after listening to this podcast, I want to try and help you understand a few things that kind of hit me. Hopefully their work will help us understand how the way we think and what we value can impact our views on church leadership. So let's get into it and see if we can't find our way back to a Christ-centered focus in our faith communities. So as I was saying, in just the last week, we've witnessed the downfall of 3 well-known church leaders. Each situation was different, but the pattern was disturbingly similar. Shocking news, public apologies, and communities left in chaos. These events are more than just news stories. They're real-life dramas affecting the lives of many in our church families. So let's think about how deeply these leaders influence our spiritual lives. Their words and actions shape how thousands, maybe millions, think about the practice and their faith. When they fail, it's not just a personal mistake. It's a crisis for the entire community. And let me just give you a personal example. So I was a children's pastor at a very small startup church many years ago. And initially we had a couple dozen kids in my class, and 6 of them were my own. So it was very small, very close-knit. And as the years went on and the financial pressures of the church mounted, tough decisions had to be made. And eventually our pastor chose one direction, and feeling unable to align with that path, half the congregation, including myself, went another. So this split was painful and not just about differing opinions. It was a profound moment of reflection on what it means to truly center our community and our lives around Christ's teachings. This experience is not unique. Many of you have shared similar stories where leadership decisions have deeply shaken your faith and your connection to your church community. This is why we need to discuss these issues openly, understand the emotional and spiritual fallout, and seek ways to ensure our faith communities are resilient and Christ-centered. We also need to consider the emotional and spiritual aftermath. Many people are not just leaving their churches, they're questioning their faith entirely, and that's sad. They're wondering about the systems in place that allowed such failures. When our trust in leaders is shaken, it can have an even more challenging issue in trusting the church itself. So this brings us to some tough questions. Why do these failures impact our faith so profoundly? What does it tell us about where we've placed our spiritual trust? These questions are crucial, and the answers might change how we view and engage our faith communities. When trust breaks down like this, it doesn't just create a gap in leadership. It leaves a spiritual emptiness that can have long-lasting effects. I know for me personally, after that church split, I was very involved. I was involved, obviously, as a volunteer, as a server. I was involved at the board level. And when we left, we decided we were going to just go to some big church and sit in the back and just rest for a year. That year turned into 6. Long-lasting effects. So as we move through these challenging times, leadership and personal beliefs, it's clear that these events aren't just setbacks. They're chances for deep reflection and potentially meaningful change. This is a moment to reconsider not only whom we trust, but why we trust them. It's an opportunity to realign our spiritual compass, making sure it points towards Christ, not merely his representatives on earth. So I'm going to take you down a little brain science here for a minute and talk about the role of brain hemispheres in our faith. I want to just introduce you to Ian McGilchrist. He's a psychiatrist who studied how different parts of our brains work. And he has some incredible insights that are very relevant to our discussion about church and faith. So if you think of your brain like a team where each member has a different role, the left hemisphere is like the organizer. It loves lists, details, and making sure everything runs on schedule. It's the part of your brain that helps you file your taxes, follow a recipe, or organize a family outing. But it tends to stick to what it knows, focusing on routines and rules. On the other hand, the right hemisphere. It's like the visionary of the team. It's all about the big picture, understanding deep feelings, catching the mood of a room, or enjoying a beautiful sunset. It's the part of your brain that helps you appreciate art, feel moved by music, or connect deeply with a friend. It thrives on new experiences and values empathy and relationships. Now, how does this relate to our faith and how we see church leadership? So when church structures lean too heavily on what we might call left brain thinking, things can get overly focused on hierarchy, rules, and authority. Important for sure, but without balance, they can make everything feel rigid and formal. So this imbalance can make us put our leaders on a pedestal, seeing them as almost perfect authorities whose words are final. But if we let right brain thinking have a say, we balance that authority with empathy and focus on relationships, which is what Christ's message is all about. Sometimes in church, we might focus too much on the structure and not enough on the personal connections that make our faith rich and meaningful. We can end up feeling more like followers of rules rather than partners in a spiritual journey. By understanding these two sides of our brain, we can see why sometimes we might focus too much on leaders and not enough on the core teachings of Christ, which are all about love, compassion, and understanding. Recognizing this helps us strive for a balance in our spiritual communities, where rules and empathy work together to create a faith experience that truly honors the teachings of Christ. So I want to shift your attention for a second to Jordan Peterson's other book. Actually, it was before 12 Rules for Life. He wrote a book called Maps of Meaning. Now, in simple terms, Peterson talks about how all of us use our beliefs and the stories we tell ourselves to shape how we see the world. It's like creating a map in our minds that help us navigate life. And at the top of this map is what we value the most, what we prioritize above everything else. So let's think about what this means for our faith. What are we putting at the top of our spiritual map? Are we maybe focusing more on our church leaders than on Christ himself? These are tough but crucial questions. Let's consider what Jesus says in the Gospel of Matthew. He says, "Nor are you to be called instructors, for you have one instructor, the Messiah." Jesus is reminding us here that no human leader should overshadow his teachings. He didn't promote the idea of power or creating layers of hierarchy. Instead, he spoke of love and of service and of humility. When we place church leaders at the peak of our spiritual values, we might distort these core teachings. It's like making the person delivering the message more important than the message itself. This can lead to a situation where the essential teachings of Christ become secondary to the authority of the leaders who preach them. So take a minute to think about your own spiritual journey. Who or what is at the center? Is it the teachings of Christ or the charm and authority of a person? Now, I know the obvious answer is Christ, but how are you feeling about what happened? Is this making you want to leave the church altogether? Because I would submit to you that if that is the case, you haven't placed Christ at the top of that, but you placed that leader at the top. That might be harsh, but I feel like that's true. This isn't just an academic question. It's about ensuring our spiritual maps correctly guide us towards the true essence of the gospel, not just the people who deliver it. Placing Christ at the center of our spiritual lives doesn't mean we disregard our leaders. Instead, it helps us see their role correctly. They're meant to guide, inspire, and teach, but not as the source of our faith, but as fellow travelers pointing us towards Christ. We all fall short. And I'm not making excuses. We all fall short. We've got to bear that in mind. So as we reflect on what we place at the top of our spiritual values, let's commit to a framework that honors Christ's teaching above all. Let's make sure our spiritual maps are drawn with Christ as the guiding star, helping us navigate the complexities of life and faith. We're going to need to realign our spiritual focus. And as we reach kind of the closing segment of our discussion today, let's talk about how we can realign our spiritual focus, ensuring Christ remains at the heart of our faith practices, both individually for yourself and within your community of believers. So first, obviously, building a personal relationship with Christ means integrating him into your daily routines, not just during Sunday services. This can look like dedicating time each morning to prayer or starting your day with a passage from the Bible that speaks to you. Consider keeping a journal of your reflections on these scriptures or your prayers, which will help you see how your relationship with Christ grows over time. I think too many Christians are just weekend warriors. It's not integrated. I'm reminded of the story of the tea bag and the tea. You want to infuse Christ into your life. So it's like putting a tea bag into hot water. The water becomes something new, and there's no way of taking it back out. So to me, that's what a personal relationship with Christ looks like. I am no longer the same. The old me died, and the new has been born again. So on a community level, it's vital that our churches encourage not just participation, but active leadership from everyone in their spiritual growth. And we're all at different places. We all need to take next steps. If you're not established in discussion groups that meet regularly over coffee or in someone else's home, if you're not talking about recent sermons or your personal experiences or your questions about faith, you need to find a group like that. These groups can be safe space to explore what the Bible's teaching mean and how we can apply Christ's lessons more faithfully. Let me share a quick story from our community. A few years ago, we noticed that many felt disconnected from the core message of the gospel, bogged down by the day-to-day management of church life. So we started small home-based groups that focused supporting on each other's spiritual journeys. The idea was taking a next step with Christ. These groups, we call them circles, have grown into a vital part of our church life, deepening our faith and bringing us closer not only to each other, but also to Christ. It reminds us that church is more than just a building. It's a community of believers sharing a journey. Additionally, involving everyone in service projects and outreach efforts can shift our focus from inward to outward. Organizing monthly community cleanups and food drives, for example, can be practical ways to live out Christ's teachings about service and compassion. These activities help put our faith into action, extending Christ's love beyond the church walls. And finally, just fostering transparency and accountability in church leadership is crucial. This means creating environments where leaders are seen more as mentors and facilitators rather than unapproachable figures. Regular town hall meetings where congregants can voice concerns, ask questions, and offer feedback can help maintain openness. By taking these steps, we not only strengthen our personal connection with Christ, but also build a healthier, more engaged community. This realignment isn't about avoiding future issues. It's about nurturing a vibrant community of believers, dedicated not to a person, but to the person of Jesus Christ. And as we wrap up today, I want to encourage each of you to consider how these ideas can be brought into your own life and your own community. How can you deepen your personal connection with Christ? How can your church better reflect his teachings in its daily activities? These aren't just questions for today, but challenges for our continued spiritual growth as followers of Christ. So I want to conclude today's episode by quickly summarizing a few key points that we've touched on. Number one, leadership failures. All fall short. We started by examining how the downfall of church leaders not only disrupts our communities, but deeply challenges our faith, underscoring the importance of where we place our trust. Second thing we covered was our brain hemispheres. We explored Ian McGilchrist's insights on the divided brain, discussing how an overemphasis on the detail-oriented left hemisphere, like hierarchy and control in our churches, could be balanced by the right hemisphere's focus on empathy and relationships. This balance can foster a healthier, Christ-centered community. Number three, value hierarchies. Delving into Jordan Peterson's maps of meaning, we questioned whether we've mistakenly elevated church leaders above Christ in our spiritual priorities. This led to us reflecting on aligning our spiritual maps to ensure Christ is at the pinnacle of our values. And number four, just practical steps. We discuss concrete steps to refocus our spiritual practices on Christ. This includes personal devotions, like scripture readings daily, communal activities like small groups or circles, discussions, and service projects, all aimed at deepening our connection with Christ and living out his teachings. I hope this episode prompts you to reflect on what you truly value in your spiritual life and how closely your community aligns with the teachings of Christ. These aren't just questions to ponder, but calls to action for realigning our faith with our everyday practices. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your experiences, and how you're applying these ideas in your life. And if you're one who has been going through this tumultuous time, I truly am sorry. I'm not trying to make light of it. I'm just trying to help us think in a different way. If you are truly bothered, the question is, what am I truly bothered about? What is it that's truly bugging me? Because I have a feeling that you're looking at a reflection in a mirror. There's something that's triggered you that you haven't actually fully dealt with yet. And that's certainly something to consider, because Christ came that you would fear not, and he came that you would be of mental health. So reach out to me on social media or wherever you listen to me. Your insights not only enrich our conversations, but foster a deeper understanding and growth in faith for us all. Thanks for joining me today on DadMode, God, Grit, and Goals. It's been a meaningful journey discussing these important topics with you. I look forward to our continued exploration in the next episode. Until then, keep striving to place Christ at the center of our lives, ensuring our faith is as fulfilling as it is profound. Remember the 4 core truths. God is good. Jesus has forgiven you. You are loved, and everything is possible. Have a great day.